Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, rideshare drivers strike. Local drivers join a national day of action. How they say they're underpaid as Uber prepares to make billions on Wall Street. And how the city is looking at nearly a dozen locations as possible sites for affordable housing.
When we know how to drop a bomb on a particular bad guy in a particular chair, sitting in a particular room, in a particular compound without collateral damage, it's because we had those high-resolution photographs that tell us exactly where to hit. This is what my lab does against viruses like Ebola.
Scientists in La Jolla show us how they're making progress in the fight against the Ebola virus. And the local film festival that's telling the stories of refugees. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, May 8th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Rideshare drivers send a message by turning off their apps. Some Uber and Lyft drivers took part in strikes held across the country. This is video from San Francisco. Drivers say they're upset about reductions in pay. The protest is timed ahead of Uber's debut as a publicly traded company. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman shows us how the strike played out here in San Diego.
Today, some Uber and Lyft drivers are here at the San Diego airport, but they're not driving. They've turned off their apps. They're here protesting, saying Uber and Lyft just aren't simply paying them enough.
If you could help us out for the day, just take a taxi. Just no Uber or Lyft.
Drivers are demanding a $28 per hour minimum rate. They were out urging people to join them in boycotting Uber and Lyft.
They charge you more and cut our pay.
Despite calls for a boycott, there were a number of rideshare drivers out picking up passengers. We caught up with Uber and Lyft driver John Wagner as he was dropping off passengers at the airport.
A driver has to put in a lot of hours and really dedicate to this to make any kind of living with this right now. People that used to do it part-time and had a substantial second income, that's not happening anymore. A lot of drivers are really they're struggling.
Some say it's almost not worth it to be a rideshare driver.
It's just frustrating. The whole thing is frustrating. I have to keep my car running. I have to have my car has to be inspected. I have to buy extra insurance on top of my regular insurance.
The protest at the airport comes as Uber is looking to make a public offering, which is expected to bring in billions of dollars.
And that money will be used for operating purposes. So since the company is losing money, its cash flow is negative. So part of the cash that they get from the IPO is helping defray the losses.
Like Lyft, Uber has never been profitable.
For them to pay the drivers more, they somehow have to hope that the drivers can get more customers. Because that's the only way that, if they pay the drivers more but they're not increasing revenue, then their losses apparently are even going to get bigger.
Hi there. Could you take a taxi or other transportation just for today?
In a statement to KPBS, Uber says drivers are the heart of their service and they cannot succeed without them. Uber says it's looking at ways to improve the driver experience, which includes more consistent earnings. A Lyft spokesman says drivers' hourly earnings have increased 7% over the last 2 years, and on average, drivers earn over $20 per hour. Lyft also says it's working to improve how to best serve drivers.
I personally feel that with a lot of big businesses, they lose track of what their real value is. And I think that Uber has done that because, as the saying goes, drivers come a dime a dozen. But when your drivers can no longer make a living and you no longer have any drivers, what kind of business do you have at that point?
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
San Diego will test a program that gives drug-addicted homeless people a choice to accept treatment instead of going to jail. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy says the city and county are joining forces in this effort.
San Diego prosecutors and police have created an alternative to being arrested for homeless people with substance addictions. Instead of being locked behind bars, people suspected of being under the influence of a controlled substance can avoid prosecution if they agree to treatment. City and county leaders announced the program outside the downtown Central Library, where they say surging drug problems have led to heightened security and ongoing bathroom closures. San Diego City Attorney Mara Elliott says the program has 3 goals. 1, to turn lives around. 2, it saves taxpayers $1.5 million a year on time spent by police, attorneys, the court, and jail staff processing the low-level drug offenders.
And 3rd, to reduce recidivism, allowing police officers and prosecutors from the city attorney's office to focus on other public safety priorities.
People who accept treatment will receive counseling and case management services at a detoxification center in downtown San Diego, operated by the McAllister Institute. San Diego Police Lieutenant Scott Wall says the program was launched last week and initial results are promising.
In the last week, we've had 9 people admitted to the sobering center. 6 of those 9 have already agreed to move forward with help and rehab services that are available. That's 2/3 of the folks that we brought in. Those are some very optimistic numbers.
Wall says people who decline the program's services could face criminal consequences and possible jail time if they are repeat offenders. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
San Diego leaders are also looking at new potential locations for affordable housing. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar says the mayor is turning to developers for help.
Mayor Kevin Faulconer announced 8 city-owned properties will be made available for affordable housing. Together, they can support nearly 200 permanent supportive housing units with subsidized rents and on-site access to social services. The 8 properties are located in 6 of the city's 9 council districts. 2 of the 8 are former libraries, 1 in Mission Hills and the other in Sierra Mesa. The other 6 city properties are vacant lots like this one in City Heights. The mayor's spokesperson says this kind of housing is needed to help the city's most vulnerable residents.
It's really for our city's most vulnerable residents. It's a lot of homeless individuals. It's people with disabilities, mental health issues, people who just can't live on their own without those supportive services, without an ongoing housing subsidy.
Last year's City Council passed a resolution promising permanent supportive housing units in every City Council district. The mayor's office says they will continue to look at the city's surplus properties and figure out ways to repurpose them. The city plans to ask for proposals from developers this summer. The winning proposals will be presented to the City Council in the fall. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
San Diego's flu season is slowing down, according to local health officials. An update from the county shows there were 86 lab-confirmed cases last week, with 1 flu-related death. More than 100 cases were reported the prior week. This is the 6th week in a row with declining flu numbers. County health officials say flu activity is elevated for this time of year, despite the downward trend. Urgent efforts are underway in Africa to stop another deadly Ebola outbreak. Here in San Diego, scientists are working on a cure. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy says the current outbreak is just one highly contagious strain that has researchers worried.
A growing Ebola epidemic in the Democratic Republic of Congo has killed more than 1,000 people since August. The World Health Organization reports the rate of new infections is climbing substantially. Nearly half of the deaths have occurred in the last 8 weeks.
So we're flying from San Diego to Congo with 8 crates of supplies to go and do our laboratory research there and bring the data back here.
Erica Ullman Sapphire is a professor at the La Jolla Institute for Immunology. She also directs a consortium of Ebola researchers from 40 labs on 5 continents. She says the difference between this Ebola outbreak and the outbreak in 2013 that killed 11,000 people is a candidate vaccine that is currently being used in the region. It could help stop the spread of the highly contagious virus, but there are challenges.
The challenge to stopping it is going to be all the civil unrest. There are multiple groups, multiple militia groups, or significant distrust of institutions, of governments, significant distrust of foreigners. So it's really hard to come in there and say, here, take this vaccine, or let us take care of your people.
She says approximately 100,000 people have been vaccinated out of the nearly 8 million people who live in the region. Most of the vaccinated have been health workers and people who have come into contact with an infected person.
It looks so far like only 15 of those have become sick. The data that we don't have is how many of those 100,000 have been exposed, and that will tell us how effective the vaccine is. If 100,000 have been exposed and 15 got sick, that's a really good vaccine. But if only 20 were exposed and 15 of those 20 got sick, that's not a very good vaccine.
According to the World Health Organization, the Ebola virus spreads quickly and is usually fatal. Symptoms include fever, vomiting, diarrhea, muscle pain, and internal and external bleeding. Ullman Sapphire's team is studying samples from people who have been vaccinated and samples from people who have come into contact with an Ebola patient.
Students, postdocs, and technicians in my laboratory from the La Jolla Institute of Immunology have been rotating in and out of Congo all year, using the molecules that we make and that we engineer here to identify cases, understand what kinds of immune responses have been elicited by the vaccine, and how broadly protective the vaccine may or may not be.
She says the current Ebola outbreak is deeply concerning because the virus is spreading in a dense and highly mobile population near the border with Uganda and Rwanda. But she says even more concerning, there are at least 5 other strains of the Ebola virus that have equally deadly pandemic potential.
There are 6 different kinds of Ebola virus, and they're about 50% different in the sequence that spells them out. So the vaccine is only protective against one. We call this the Zaire kind. Well, there's also the Sudan kind, the Bundabujo kind, the Bombali kind, lots of kinds. And each one of them has equivalent pandemic potential, but we don't know what's going to emerge next.
She says studying the antibodies Ebola survivors have made is key in finding a treatment.
We're looking at people that have survived. We're looking at elderly people with a lifetime exposure of hunting, of eating bushmeat, or of healthcare work that are now immune to all of these different species. And we're looking at what their immune system has come up with to protect them.
She's mapping the virus's molecules using high-resolution photographs to understand where the virus is vulnerable and where to target a therapy or vaccine. She compares it to military intelligence photos.
When we know how to drop a bomb on a particular bad guy in a particular chair, sitting in a particular room, in a particular compound without collateral damage, it's because we had those high-resolution photographs that tell us exactly where to hit. This is what my lab does against viruses like Ebola. We take these high-resolution photographs to figure out how does the virus infect, where is it vulnerable, where can we target a therapeutic, or how do we design a vaccine that's going to beautifully mimic this virus and give a person immunity before they get exposed.
For Ullman Saphire and her team, the Congo outbreak and the potential of related viral outbreaks has renewed her urgency to find a cure.
And so we need to be prepared for what might come at us for the next outbreak. We need vaccines that are broadly protective, and we need treatments that we can mobilize for whatever people might have become infected with.
Ullman Saphire is planning to return to the Congo to study Ebola this summer. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Tonight on KPBS, Nova goes inside the mega fire. It's all about last year's deadly campfire in Northern California, why it happened, and what scientists are learning about the nature of wildfires. Here's a preview of tonight's episode.
This has got potential for a major incident.
A wildfire races toward a sleeping California town.
Right now, guys, paradise is on effing fire.
Residents awaken to a nightmare.
I don't want to die here.
Scientists speed toward the danger zone.
Yes, that's a scan we want.
Risking it all to unlock the mysteries of fire.
It's not something that you can just observe it and figure out how it works.
Paradise is lost.
We have witnessed literally an entire community gone.
It's the worst fire in a season of worsts. But why? A history of mismanagement.
Everywhere, foresters were trying to do the same silly thing.
A warming climate.
I think we're moving into uncharted territory.
And a building boom in the forest.
We're literally putting homes in the line of fire.
The stakes and the flames grow higher.
Right now, I'm wondering if we're in a good spot.
Inside the megafire on Nova.
Tonight's episode of Nova Inside the Mega Fire airs tonight at 9 here on KPBS. Another chance of rain is expected this week. Dajia Swan has tonight's forecast.
The trend is that May gray, and that's going to continue as we head into tonight's forecast as well as into tomorrow. Low clouds remain very dominant, especially at the coast. Now into your Thursday night and really into Friday, we'll be tracking out another upper level low. That's going to bring the chance for showers and thunderstorm activity for Friday and Saturday for the entirety of San Diego County. So whether you're at the coast, in the deserts, at the mountains, you're going to be looking at some chances for some wet weather. The last several hours on the satellite showing not a lot of precipitation into California, but we are definitely noticing wet weather back in the Four Corners. And some of that energy will be interacting with our next upper level low that's on the way. So setting it up for the extended forecast here, you're going to be needing the umbrella depending on your location. Now, talking about tonight, you're looking at a low 61 in San Diego, dropping down to 56 in Oceanside. Also on the gloomy side with that low cloud deck extending into your area. 62 for the low in Borrego Springs and 46 in Mount Laguna. Not moonlit skies in towards Mount Laguna either, but definitely not as cloudy compared to the coast. Now, as we start your Thursday, we start off dry at much of the California coastline. Going to start to see some shower activity continuing in towards the Four Corners. There even some higher elevation snow as you head back into Colorado. But we will continue to see clouds be dominant through the morning and nighttime hours in San Diego and Oceanside, topping off in the upper 60s, 86 in Borrego Springs and 56 in Mount Laguna. Then as we head into late Thursday and continuing into the upcoming week, we'll be tracking out our low pressure system. That's going to bring the chance for some shower and thunderstorm activity, and heat also going to be suppressed here, so feeling a bit cooler. Late week, once again, under this upper level trough, upper level low, bringing in the shower potential, and once again, not as warm as some of us would like to be. Upper 60s for tomorrow's high rather, and then looking at a high of 70 for your Friday with spotty showers at the coast, passing showers Saturday, then improvements into the early week. Seeing that same pattern here, spotty showers inland Friday with a high of 69, some showers likely and thunderstorms into the deserts for the end of the week with highs in the lower 80s. And then as we move into the mountains, also calling for wet weather and a chance for a thunderstorm on Friday. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
Tonight is the second installment of the IRC's International Documentary Film Series happening at Balboa Park. And here to tell us more about it is Donna Duvin. She's the Executive Director of the IRC, which is the International Rescue Committee. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
So what can you tell us about tonight's event?
Well, it's a celebration of our 11th anniversary film series, which I'm really happy to bring to the audience. It brings a unique perspective from around the globe that really features the refugee experience. And the idea is to bring the conversation to the audience in a way that they have a chance to experience that for themselves, to raise pertinent questions that they may have about the refugee experience and form their own opinions.
And I understand that these three films are separate, but are there any uniting themes that are repeated?
Well, I think the thing we really want to bring home to the audience is that people don't flee their home and loved ones and great memories by choice. They flee because they have no choice. It's because of violence and persecution that they up and leave everything behind. And it's a torturous journey that they undertake, oftentimes with women and children in tow. And we want them to understand what fortitude, what resilience, and what courage it takes for people to make that choice.
And how does this film series fit into the IRC's overall goal?
Well, we've been fortunate to be doing this work in San Diego for over 40 years, which means we were at the very forefront of receiving refugee families back in the 1970s. And so every day since then, we've had the opportunity and the privilege of welcoming refugee families into San Diego to provide them with a brand new beginning. And tonight's film is especially meaningful for me. I really love this film because it depicts 35 Syrian women who come together in a Lebanese refugee camp who are introduced to the experience of theater and they have a chance to not only play and dream, but also to find their own voices. And for many of the families that we resettled here in San Diego, especially back in 2016, that included many Syrian families.
And how has the resettlement process here in San Diego changed under the Trump administration?
Well, it's definitely a slower pace than what we had seen in earlier years. The administration actually dropped the ceiling for the number of refugees that they would allow into the country from 75,000 in earlier years to 30,000 for this year. And so right now our real goal is to make sure that every last family that's able to be received in the U.S. has that opportunity to find safety.
So yesterday, lawmakers met at the White House, and it's making news that the conversation included reform for legal immigration. Any concerns about changes to the legal immigration process and how that might impact refugees and asylum seekers?
I think anytime we talk about welcoming the foreign-born, I think, we start to put an emphasis on what value they bring to the country, and we start to evaluate that. With refugees and with asylum seekers, they are brought to our borders because they're fleeing violence and persecution, which means that they are sometimes the most vulnerable families that are out there. So we would hope that we would be able to change the dialogue, not just about what families can bring to us, but what they can contribute once they're here if given the right opportunity.
And getting back to tonight's film series, what do you hope that people who attend come away from the theater with?
I think I want them to see the heart and just the conviction of people who are seeking a new opportunity. The women that are depicted in tonight's film are women who have oftentimes been contained in terms of their opportunities to be empowered to have careers or seek an education. And when they're given that opportunity, even sometimes through a refugee camp, to have education for the first time, or if they come to another country and seek education or empowerment and freedoms, you see individuals who have been under threat of violence, who are coming to life for the very first time and finding their voices. And it's such an uplifting opportunity to be a part of, and that's what we have a chance to experience day in and day out here in San Diego.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for more information about the IRC's International Documentary Film Series happening tonight, go to kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, Congress moves to hold the U.S. Attorney General in contempt as President Trump asserts executive privilege on the Mueller report. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
50 years since the moon landing, NASA is busy training a new class of astronauts. Tamika Weatherspoon from Houston Public Media shows us how they're getting ready for space.
This is Building 9, where we have a whole one-to-one, life-size mock-up of the International Space Station.
Take me back to when you were first selected to be a part of NASA. What did that feel like when you got the acceptance letter?
It's actually a phone call, and I was just so much in shock that I said something very eloquent like, "Really?" We're going to be welcoming the new class of astronauts. They will embark on this 2-year astronaut candidate training period where they will be instructed and trained and then demonstrate proficiency in 5 main areas in order to graduate from being astronaut candidates and become full-fledged assignable astronauts. We have everyone's favorite, I think, learning how to use the spacesuit. We do that in the neutral buoyancy lab. You're weighing over 400 pounds when you're in the suit. So every movement, every hand movement is like squeezing an exercise ball. Then we have robotics training. So we learn how to fly the Canadarm, the big robotic arm that's on the outside of the space station. So we still use it on a routine basis to either reconfigure the space station, using it for spacewalks, using it to do different tasks or repairs on the outside of the space station. Third area that we have is the International Space Station systems. When we're up there, if a light bulb needs to be changed or the toilet breaks, and that does happen quite a lot, we can't call a plumber or an electrician. We have to have a really diverse set of training so that we do all of that ourselves. So the fourth main area is Russian language. It's an international crew up there. Everybody has to be able to speak both Russian and English. And then the fifth main area in which we have to become proficient in order to graduate is flight training.
So this is
Ellington Airfield, and this is where we have our T-38s, and we do something called space flight readiness training. It is the most real-world thing that we do other than the actual flying in space. And so it also requires us to learn to prioritize, make decisions, and communicate effectively. And so it's a really dense type of training that we get to do.
I mean, yes, it seems very important, but it also seems really fun. I mean, dangerous, but fun.
Dangerous, but fun. That's a good description of flying the T-38.
You can find more on NASA and the anniversary of the moon landing at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Now here's a recap of tonight's top stories. Local rideshare drivers took part in a national work stoppage. Drivers for Lyft and Uber turned off their apps and demonstrated outside the San Diego airport. They say Uber should pay drivers more as it prepares to go public later this week. San Diego will test a program that gives drug-addicted homeless people a choice to accept treatment instead of going to jail. Those who accept treatment will receive counseling and case management services at a detox center downtown. Mayor Kevin Faulconer has a list of 8 places where the city can develop affordable housing in San Diego. He's asking developers to come up with plans. Each lot is currently owned by the city. They include 2 former libraries. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.